Okay, good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say a very big thank you to each one of you. We know the weather is really, really hot. So thank you all for taking the time out of your busy days to come here at our DevOps playground meetup to do Jenkins X. As some of you may know, some of you may not know, we do this event every month. Just for a quick showing, whose DevOps event with ECS is their first time here? Who's been the first time? Wow. So welcome. Really, really great. This is a great turnout. So as I said, we're ECS Digital. We are a digital transformation organization, and we do this within the industry. We host these events, as I said, every month, and it's a free event where you can come in and you can get hands-on experience and hands-on things with different tools. And this month we're doing it with Jenkins X. So we have got Gareth and Kai here from CloudBees going to do this event. So after the event, we've got pizza, so stay around, and there are ice creams and beer in the fridge. So at any point in time, you want to grab a cold beer or some ice cream, please help yourselves, okay? Anyone that's wearing the Panda t-shirt, if you don't know, this is our logo. So this is what we use for the DevOps Playground. Ask us any questions. We will be dotting around during the session to help you guys out if anyone gets stuck. So yeah, this is our event. So now hand over to Gareth and Kai. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Is it coming through? Is that all right? Yeah. Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, so this is a bit of a post in a bit. My name's Gareth Evans. I work for CloudBees. I've been at CloudBees for just over a year now, and the entire time I've been there, I've been working on Jenkins X. This is Kai Cooper. Kai and I used to work together in a previous role, and he's joined the Jenkins X team around about 6 months ago. Yep. So we're predominantly focused on the open source project. So before we really start, I mean, who's heard about Jenkins X? Yeah. Who's heard about Jenkins CI? Yeah. Similar-ish numbers, slightly more. What about who's sort of familiar with Kubernetes? Okay. I can't really tell. So what I'm hoping to go over is a sort of a very high-level view of what Jenkins X is, some of the problems it's there to solve, why it's different from your sort of standard Jenkins CI installation. I'm going to talk about some of the sort of build controllers and installation options that you might have. Very much a very high-level architecture. We're hoping to do a workshop, if we can, on creating a cluster, installing Jenkins X using a brand new thing called JX Boot. This will be the first demo ever of JX Boot, or the first workshop with JX Boot. Well, hopefully. Well, no, we will definitely do it. So we have an issue. One of the key Google APIs that we need is currently down, and you may have seen we're frantically refreshing, seeing if we can enable it. I have a personal project that I can use that has that API enabled, but I don't have enough quota to add everyone to it. So if we can't get it enabled in time, worst case scenario, I'm just going to run through a live demo rather than making it a workshop. But you'll be able to follow the slides afterwards, and it should be exactly the same. What we're hoping to do, create a GKE cluster, install Jenkins X using JX Boot. We'll create an application. We're going to automatically watch that promote through into a staging environment. We're then going to make a modification to that application. We're going to watch the change appear in what we call a preview environment. We're going to use a GitOps approval process to do that. We're going to merge it, and we'll see it go right the way through. And when testing this whole thing normally takes about 15 minutes, but we're expecting it to take a little bit longer today. So that's it. So Jenkins X. For those of you that are familiar with Jenkins X, this logo might seem a bit new. Officially, it got launched today. Although, So there are some new Jenkins X stickers available on the desk over there. If you want some, you can see some on the laptop. This is the old one. These are the new logos. Yeah, just trying to sort of move with the times really, and create something that's a bit fresh. I think it went out on the newsletter on Tuesday, but at the moment, this is the first time. Certainly, the stickers at the back. This is the first time that there are stickers available with the new logo on. So if that's all you take away from this, we're happy. And this is our Jenkins X website at the bottom here. If you want to do this, or I can distribute all these slides afterwards if that's helpful. So before we kick into Jenkins X, it's worth talking about Jenkins CI. So this is kind of what we're piggybacking on all of the success that Jenkins CI has. So originally known as Hudson, am I still on something? No, okay, we're good. Originally known as Hudson, started by Kasuke in 2004. As far as we know, due to some of the metrics that get reported back from the Jenkins server, we know that there are around about 200,000 masters in production. Well, we know there are over 200,000 masters. I mean, we're just under 200,000, and that was the first of, that's sort of like halfway through last year. So we think probably about 200,000 masters that are reporting back at the moment. Most people, if they're running Jenkins, are running it not publicly available on the internet. So we estimate the actual number is around about 1 million, based on some surveys that we've done, trying to look into the number of people that are exposing their Jenkins metrics versus not. So that's what we think they are. And there are, there's thousands, literally thousands of available plugins that you can install on Jenkins to do whatever it is that you need it to do. Unfortunately, that has some downside. Firstly, there are thousands of available plugins that you can install on Jenkins. Is that how, in a single JVM, how do you test a combination of 1,000 different items? If you just do the maths on how you work that out, it's actually impossible. And a lot of these plugins aren't CloudBees contributed, or they're not official Jenkins ones. They're community contributed ones. So how do you make sure that they're being upgraded the right? So it's very, very difficult. The other thing, if you try to run Jenkins, it's a single point of failure at any point. So you have a master, it receives webhooks, but it can take 3 to 4 minutes to start up. It's very difficult, unless you're using the official CloudBees supported version of Jenkins. It's very difficult to create that in a HA environment, which allows you to take down your master, fail it over, and do it. And now, I'm not saying it's impossible. There are people that have done this, but we know there are, they have teams and teams of people that are just there to try and work out how to do a zero downtime deployment to Jenkins. And that's not where we want to be. The other thing is, as CD is becoming more, prevalent in the industry, having any form of outage in your sort of deployment infrastructure, that's now becoming critical. Previously, it was just a pain. It's, I can't deploy, I'll just wait. It's not a problem. I only deploy once every 6 months. I'll just wait a little bit. But now we're talking about people deploying, hundreds, thousands of times per day. It's like, how do you, if you have something that takes that down for a period of time, that becomes like properly business critical. Some other points like GitHub rate limiting, we know this has been a big issue, and out of memory issue. So when Jenkins X was created, we wanted to it wasn't a layer on top of Jenkins. We wanted to rethink how CI and CD was being done in the cloud. And this is Jenkins X. So we originally, the tagline is automated CI and CD for Kubernetes. It's not really for Kubernetes. So it runs on top of Kubernetes. So we utilize Kubernetes as our underlying operating system. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be working on deploying to Kubernetes to make this work. if you're writing standard Java applications that are deploying in a certain way, Jenkins X could well work for you. We're quite opinionated in how we feel things should work, so that every commit should be some form of release. We use a lot of the basics from the Accelerate book that came out a few years ago in terms of how we feel that software development should be done. And sometimes if you're trying to deviate from the recommendations of the Accelerate book, we might fight against you a little bit, but that's for your own benefit. We use build packs to quickly create new applications. So build packs is something that originally I think came out of the Heroku and the Cloud Foundry sort of environments. So we something very, very similar where we allow someone to literally create an application that's ready to go, ready to be deployed within seconds. We use GitOps to then take those applications and those versions that are then released and promote those between environments. What that actually means is we have a Git repository that completely describes the state of an environment at any one point in time. So if it comes to recovery or an environment replication, we just apply that chart somewhere else. Preview environments is something I'm going to show you in a little bit. This preview environment is something that's really, I think when we first developed it, we didn't think it would have the impact that it really did. We thought it's kind of like a nice to have, but actually we found it's been absolutely fantastic for showing visual changes against a pull request. What it means is that when you make a pull request and you push the change to the code, push it to GitHub, Jenkins X will automatically build a version of that application and deploy it with its dependencies into an isolated environment and comment back on the pull request with the URL that you can go and have a look at those changes. Now, obviously, that's not useful for every type of application that everybody's deploying, but if it's a web application or sometimes a REST API or something like that, and you want to go and try those out and run some real tests, this is pre-merge, you can go and do that. And then you can run the tests against it and merge it in if you want. We use ChatOps, which is a term kind of that comes out of, at the moment, we're heavily invested in Prow. So Prow is a Kubernetes project that allows communications on sort of pull requests, where using commands on your basically in your GitHub, when you create an issue, you type a command, and then Jenkins X will listen to that command using Prow and do something. And it could be anything. It could just be add a label or create a new environment or something, or it could be like I want to approve this change and do that. So we use that very heavily. We're aiming to improve developer productivity as much as possible. Yep, it is open source, completely open source. The Jenkins X stuff that we'll show you today is everything is completely open source. There's nothing closed source there. In terms of the overall architecture, it's microservices based. We've tried to design it for extension from the word off, and we integrate. We're very, very heavily relying on Kubernetes CRDs. So if you're familiar with CRDs, anybody? If you're not familiar, I've got a slide later on that I sort of like, I don't want to put too much information in it. CRD, or custom resource definitions, are a way of extending the Kubernetes API server. So it's almost like embedding your own APIs inside Kubernetes itself. So it allows, it's amazing for extension and integration between different components. So we rely on a number of components that are in there that I'll show you in a second. And we all hook in and we all integrate through CRDs. In terms of topologies and sort of build controllers, there's kind of like two flavors. There's your static master, and there's your serverless stuff. So what static means is that when you install Jenkins X, there's a flag that you can use. I can't actually remember off the top of my head whether it's static master or static Jenkins, but you do minus something, and it will, is it static master? It will install a traditional Jenkins server and configure it. It will set up your API token. It will do that. It has a a standard set of plugins that it uses, and it does all that. That's brilliant. And that may help you get to where you need to be, but that's not where we want to sort of take you. So what we're really interested in is the serverless stuff. So with the invention of cloud, we want to see that when nothing is running, we want you to have zero cloud costs. Right? So if we can we scale to nothing? So there were two versions of this. The original one was called Jenkins File Runner, which we've kind of deprecated because it's a very heavyweight JVM-based process. And the new one is called Tekton. So has anyone heard of Tekton here? So Perfect. So Tekton is a fantastic project that's come out of Google in the past 6 months. It was originally called Knative or Knative Build. And then Knative has kind of forked into the Knative Serve side and Knative Build and Knative Pipelines that have become Tekton. So Tekton is a way of processing pipelines and individual tasks and resources inside a Kubernetes cluster. And it's fantastic. And we rely really, really heavily on that. So if I show you, this is my super high level architecture in 6 boxes. So we've got developers at the top, and they're pushing code to GitHub. We're getting events coming down into Prowl that is then orchestrating stuff that's happening. Behind the scenes, Prowl is turning those events into what we call Jenkins X pipelines. The individual steps are getting turned into Tekton tasks and task runs and resources and stuff. And they're getting executed on Kubernetes. And Kubernetes is working out how to schedule those as it sees fit. So if you have a particular part of your build pipeline that relies on a GPU, you just flag it in a certain way and it will split it down and it will schedule it on the node that it needs it to run on, and it will combine the results and done. In terms of how do Jenkins or developers interact with Jenkins X, at the moment, in the open source world, there's a CLI. So everything is done via the CLI. There is a UI that's coming. I don't know when, which is coming from CloudBees. That is a freemium version, so it's free. You don't have to pay for it, but it does require you to give your email address when you sign up for it. I think end of this month. Yeah, I know it's very soon. I know it's either this month or next month. But it's nice and graphical, and you can see like applications get deployed through different environments, and it's all very cool. If you're interested at an even higher level, a slightly lower level, some of the things that are involved. We store a lot of our secrets inside Vault, so we use HashiCorp Vault for a lot of this stuff. We're using cloud storage for our build cache and artifacts repository, all the test reports. All the CRDs push up into ECCD that's like replicated around across the cluster and things like that. I'll skip over this slide. This is basically just saying how you can use CRDs and controllers to extend Kubernetes in a way that allows you to do all this stuff. And this is how we do it, and all of the tools that we rely on do it the same way. Cool. This is how to get in contact with me. I'm going to go on to the demo now. If you want any more information about Jenkins X, we're all on the Kubernetes Slack channels. So get on there, Jenkins X Dev, Jenkins X User. You can find us all. So feel free to join those. Also, I need to give a shout out to this link at the bottom. So the Jenkins XIO community. There is a bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, bi-weekly newsletter that comes out. Oscar sends this out every 2 weeks with tips and tricks and interviews with people and sort of some really good insight on some new Jenkins X features that are there, if people are interested. Cool. Right, workshop, but we know the workshop's not quite going to work. Still down? Do it one more time. If it doesn't come back within like 3 seconds, it's definitely down. Does anyone work for Google? No, we can't say that because Google are the main contributors to Tecton, and we love Tecton. Okay, right. So I've got. Try and make this bigger. So we have this. How does this page get distributed to everybody?
Well, we usually create a bit.ly link and then we just let people share it.
Okay, it doesn't matter for that. Okay, so I'm going to run through this demo. If you've got any questions, actually, has anybody got any questions now before I go into this? Before I start? No, fantastic. So this will be shared afterwards. Hopefully, you should be able to follow this through afterwards. So we're going to skip through down to here. We know that we have. The first part is about whether or not you want to use this sandbox account that we're going to try and use that we're not going to be able to do, or register for a GCP trial, which unfortunately also won't work because the Google outage is about enabling the Kubernetes API on new projects, and that's where we're sort of falling foul. So we'll skip through this. The very first part that we need to do is actually we need a GitHub token to do this. So I'm just going to very quickly create a fresh one.
This is for your Kubernetes repositories.
Yeah.
That's critical now. So everything that happens to your repository can say GitHub. All these events can get sent to Jenkins X.
I'm happy that that's recorded because hopefully I'm going to remember to delete it by the end of this meeting. Yeah. Please stop copying that. Cool. Okay. So, where are we? Not this. Oh, yeah. Let's go to this one. So the first thing we're going to run is we know that we're logged in. We're happy. We're going to create a cluster. So I'm going to run JX create cluster. There's lots of different types of environments you can create your cluster on. We can do it on GKE. I'm going to skip the installation and I'm going to skip the login because I know that I'm automatically logged in. And I'm just going to provide a cluster name of yeah, that should be fine. So what this is going to do, this is like a wrapper around G-Cloud. Actually, is that visible for everybody? Does anybody need that bigger, or is that okay? This is a wrapper around G-Cloud that's going to go off, and it's going to try and interpret my answers, and it's going to install. It's going to create me a GKE cluster that's ready to go. What we missed out on the top is that we're not saying this is how you would run your production cluster, because we know that a lot of people like to use Terraform, they like to use CloudFormation, they like to use, they will have their own teams that will like to manage it in the same way. But we're trying to provide sort of a simple way of getting a cluster on GKE or EKS or AKS even up and running as quickly as possible so they can try out Jenkins X. You'll see here that we selected West 1B, Europe West 1B, which is Belgium. Not sure why, but it always seems to be a little bit faster than London. Yeah, it's cheaper. Again, don't know why. We default the minimum number of nodes to 3 and the maximum to 5. Now, this is very easy for you to, if you want to change how that works, you just use the -- advanced flag when you install, and you get prompted for every single question. But we know that that can be sort of like question overload for people that they don't know how many nodes I need. And then we try to guess what the best sort of things that you would be to best sort of answers. So like we know that the API, the Google Cloud Storage API, we assume you'd want to enable that, and we also assume you'd want to use the container registry and things like that and things. So this is creating a cluster. It's not installing anything in that cluster. It is literally just creating a Google Cloud cluster. If I get my other window open, here we are, DevOps Playground. You can see it's coming. Whilst I'm doing that, I may as well delete the other one. That was my test cluster from earlier. This normally takes at most about 5 minutes. So if anyone wants to get on the piano at the back of the room.
So you wouldn't advise us to install Kubernetes this way?
Yeah, oops, sorry. Here we are. Do I use that?
Was that a microphone?
Hello. Yeah, that works. So you wouldn't advise us to install Jenkins X, the cluster, the Kubernetes cluster this way?
So this part is all about creating the cluster itself, not installing JX. Inside CloudBees, we're quite happy to do it this way. It kind of depends on your adversity to risk. I like Vegeta and HSBC. There's no way they're going to do it. We talk to many customers that have completely separate teams that create their Kubernetes clusters, and those can then do the Jenkins X installation. And quite often the two of them aren't allowed to talk, and they're not to do that. So part of this, what we're calling the JX boot process, is to try and overcome that. So it's kind of up to you. What this is doing, this is basically doing the same as clicking through the UI. Mm-hmm. It's using G-Cloud behind the scenes, but it's kind of making it repeatable. But yeah,
okay. Thanks.
It's up to you. Yep.
Hello, can you hear me? Great.
Yep.
That's running a binary called JX. Where did you get that from? Did I miss that bit?
Yes, certainly. So this is like pre-installed. So one of the very first steps, here we are. So it's available on GitHub. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Is that big enough?
Just about.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's free and ready to go now. You can
free.
grab it.
If you're on a Mac and you're using Brew, you can just do brew install. I think you have to tap it first, don't you? But it's like, yeah, and then it's available. I'm not sure if we support. There's talk about supporting like Chocolatey and all the other. Do we? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. So I've got a cluster here that's been created. It's pretty empty. I'm just going to double check that I don't have. So now that that's there, what we're going to do is we're going to run JX boot. And it's as simple, I'm going to say as simple as running this. And there are a few questions that it's going to ask us. So by default, you just kind of select yes to most of them. It knows the name of the cluster because that's the cluster that it's already put into my kube config. So it knows how to do that. It's going to ask me the Git owner for my environment repositories now. So I'm just going to use my personal GitHub account. It's going to sort of validate that. One of the first things it does about JX boot, as it runs through it, you provide it some answers. It tries to validate that those questions and answers are acceptable. So it's trying to create a Canico service account. It's sort of looking at it saying, oh, there's a Canico the service account with a name that I'm expecting doesn't actually exist. So it's going to often create the account, it's going to download the key, it's then going to inject the key into a secret inside Kubernetes, ready to go. So it's already. For those of you that don't know what Canico is a way of building a cluster inside, building containers inside a cluster without mounting the Docker socket. So it's like a safe way of doing that.
So one thing JX Boot does is it follows kind of its own pipeline methodology. So Jenkins X is built upon, the future Jenkins X is built upon using pipelines. And what JX Boot does is it runs essentially a Tecton-based pipeline locally. And what we're calling that is meta pipelines. So we're trying to reap the benefits of our own sort of behavior in sort of what we expect to do out there in the Kubernetes cluster. We also try and do locally for the user that's installing it as well. So it runs a deterministic flow or recipe of what you expect to achieve, and then uses Helm to apply that and template that, and then kubectl to apply it.
So this is a recent change that's gone in. I need to just quickly upgrade my CLI, which won't take too long.
Okay, cool. So that we can see that happening right now. Actually, it's going from the 495 to 515, and that is getting that from the releases page on Jenkins X right now. I'd have thought the internet would be a bit quicker here.
It's the heat.
It's the heat. It's the heat.
What CLI is that? Jenkins X.
So that's the actual JX binary. Yeah.
Come on.
That's the difference between JX install and JX boot. I use install normally.
It's a really good question. So originally there was JX install, and then there was JX create cluster that kind of creates a cluster and then calls JX install. What we found is that the problem we had is that logic was getting dropped in everywhere. In between, there was create cluster, JX install, and JX init, and there's no easy way to reason about what was happening at a cluster at any point in time. So the decision was taken that what we actually need to do is completely separate the create cluster commands from the installation commands. One of the other things we've done at the sort of the same time is that we've basically dropped or restricted our use of Helm. So Helm is a package manager tool for Kubernetes. I'll just run JX boot in the background whilst I'm talking. So it puts an agent, by default, it puts an agent called Tiller into the cluster, and then it can communicate with it and install things. That's it's kind of like a huge security hole for most people, and for us as well. So one of the things that we did is that we've removed that. We use Helm to do templating. We template sort of Kubernetes manifests in a certain way and apply them in the correct order. And the really nice thing about JX Boot is it's idempotent, so you can run it over and over again. So if your installation fails halfway through, you just run again, and it'll just recover from where you are. And in fact, it's just done that. So
is it a replacement for JX install?
yeah, so we want it to be the replacement for JX install. It's kind of like we realized after a massive amount of customer feedback that we were getting the installation wrong, essentially, or the JX install process was suboptimal, should we say? And this was a far better way of doing it. So
It's been around 3 weeks now.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And what this is actually doing is running through a Tecton pipeline. I'll bring up the pipeline whilst it's doing it. So it runs through this pipeline step by step. and you can have a look at it as it's going through. These are all the individual steps that it runs. So it runs a sort of JX step git validate command, and then it runs a JX step verify pre-install. But if you want to change the way that you're installing JX for whatever reason, you can go and do that. We had a lot of feedback that people wanted to inject other steps halfway through their installation for whatever reason.
Yeah, you should be able to go away with your own. If you've got a Google account and you haven't yet created a trial account in Google, you should be able to stand up a very simple cluster using Gareth's README article in the DevOps Playground store, which is linked through from that link there, and in creating this workshop.
It's going to ask me for a sort of default admin user and password. So we've got admin. The password is kind of, it's purely to access deck and things like that. So the deck and the tied URLs, which I'm not going to demonstrate. So they're kind of, it's not that important. So you type anything in from that. It's then going to ask me for a pipeline bot user. So in a real-life installation of Jenkins X, you have a different user that runs inside the cluster to outside the cluster. So individual users are using their own GitHub tokens to post code, but the user that's running inside the cluster is an isolated user. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run my own, use my own information thing here, and I'm going to use my access token. That was here.
So for real-world scenarios, like Gareth was mentioning there, so if you had, say if you're in a team of people, and you had like 5 developers, you wouldn't want one of those 5 developers to be that bot user, right? Because they'd be commenting on some of the PRs you're raising, and you'd be like, oh, why is he commenting on that? You'd want a bot user that you all know is automated, that would be commenting, that would be helping, merging some of those pull requests if you're using ChatOps. So you'd want to set that up yourself separately, and to supply those details when you're installing this for your team or for yourself or however you want to set it up.
Cool. Almost there. Any questions at this point? As soon as this Helm installation is completed, what we're going to do is we'll create an application and then push that up, and then you can see that it's not going to take very long. In fact, whilst I'm doing this, I can see what's happening. So whilst this is happening, we can actually see the pods that are being created in terms of our Kubernetes cluster. So we've got choir, deck, hook, horror, I don't even know how you pronounce that one, plank, prow at the bottom. They are all prow components that come from the Kubernetes test infra. We have some Jenkins X one. You can see the Tecton stuff is there as well. So we're just watching that deploy. So where were we? We were just here. So as we're coming through this, it's now creating us some repositories to store our staging and our production configuration in. So these are the kind of defaults. If you don't want it to do this, there's a flag to disable this, and you can go and add the environments in afterwards. You'll see it go through. We're then updating any webhooks on those components to see that. So anybody makes a change to those environment configurations, that we can then trigger builds or validation based on that. And at the end, we are just waiting for the pods to become ready. Which at most takes 30 minutes, but it's definitely not going to take 30 minutes.
But again, this is your complete build environment here, and you could even run everything on this environment as well. So it's not just something you can play with. You could actually run any components from it right now and make changes immediately as soon as it's ready.
Yes, this is production ready. Production ready environment auto-scaling inside Kubernetes will scale to as minimal as possible. Actually, the one component that doesn't scale particularly well down to 0 is Nexus. We have a kind of a solution for that. We have another a project called Bucket Repo that can be used as a Nexus replacement. So if you're doing Java development, it's a way of doing that. So, yeah. Nexus is the largest component by far in the thing. It almost requires an entire node just by itself to run on, just because of the size of the JVM. Okay, cool. So we're all good. Done. Eventually. No deep breaths at all. And we've done some post-validation to make sure that the installation is looking okay. So in Kubernetes terms, if I'm going in and I want to have a look at how it looks, I can get the deployments. And they all seem to be up and running. Syncer is actually something that we've disabled, so ignore the fact that that's set to 0 at the moment. That's something that will soon be removed. If I want to look at the individual pods that are running, so we have them all here. I can see I should have 3 nodes. Yep. So come down to here. So what just happened? Well, we created a cluster on GKE. It's up and running. We've configured and installed Jenkins X using GitOps. If I show you the tree structure of this actual folder that I'm in, if I need to, these are all just charts, and these are Helm charts. If you want to make a change, you simply make a change to your JX requirements.yaml, and it will. And then you just run JXBoot again, and it will apply that config change. This was something that was very, very difficult to do before. I'm not going to do it now, but like enabling, if you're changing the domain name, you just basically enable external DNS, set that to true, switch the domain name, and it will configure DNS in Google for you automatically. So it installs external DNS, it configures a zone inside there. As long as you've got your top level delegation working, it's done. If you want to enable Let's Encrypt to do that, you just set your TLS enable to be true. You need to give it an email address, but that's it. It's that straightforward. You just run JXBoot again, and you can watch the ingress rules, and they just get applied. Right, so we're going to create an application. So to do this, we use quick starts. So we use the JX create quick start. It's going to, for this purposes, it's going to prompt me for my GitHub username and password again, because actually the person that would install Jenkins X into a cluster isn't necessarily the person that would be creating a cluster. So it's actually assuming that you're 2 different people. So if you imagine that I've got a new laptop, I'm now a developer, I've connected to the cluster, this is how I'm going to do. So, but for now, I'm going to type in the same information. I'm going to use my super secret access token. It's definitely not compromised already. I'm going to put it in the org. I'm going to create a repository. Give it a name. It's definitely not one I've used already. When I was demoing this to Kai the other day, I kept choosing names that already existed. It took about 30 minutes to get past this point.
You were 5. Yeah. It was like, oh, that's already there.
So these are all the different quick starts that we support, but it's possible for you to add your own. Even as an organization, you can host these on private repos if you need to, or internal you can do whatever you need. We're going to use the Golang HTTP one because it's the quickest to build and it's the simplest, and it's basically a single file. What it's going to do, it's going to create me a Git repository. It's going to use a kind of scaffolding system to create all of the code that I need. It then uses language detection to try and work out how that repository was built. And if it thinks, because it will detect that it's a Golang-based application, it's going to add in what it thinks you need for Golang. And that may not be perfect for every scenario that you need. But let's have a look. So if we go into here, we have, what it actually originally created us was the main.go and the Jenkins X.yaml, and that's pretty much it. And then the build pack detection has kicked in and said, well, you actually need some Helm charts to do that. So I've created you Helm charts for DevOps Playground and for a preview environment. And I'm also going to create you a Makefile and a Docker file in a way that I think you should be able to use that to build your application. Now, that's up, if you want to use those build packs, that's up to you. You want to provide your own if you have a different way of doing things. It's completely configurable to do that. So let's just watch the activity. And what this is going to do, this is actually going to build the application. It may take a few minutes the very first time. I'm watching the events that are coming into ECCD around pipeline activities, and I'm watching them go through the pipelines, and you'll slowly see these steps going through. So that's essentially running each of the steps. It might be better if I show you the build logs. So one of the interesting parts here, so this big info block here, this is actually using Canico to do the build. So we're not mounting the Docker socket, we're using a Google project called Canico that has, I actually don't know how it works, but it's fantastic. It allows you to build Docker containers or Docker images from the file system, like without being privileged, and then it sort of combines them back up and pushes them. And what we're actually doing is, you can see here, we've pushed this version to GCR. So not just Docker Hub or an internal registry. This has gone into Google's own container registry, where you can enable all the sort of container scanning that it is that you need to do. So that's going through. So let's just check the build logs again. So now that that original master build has completed, it's made a change to our staging environment, which let's get up on here. I can't remember what I called it.
Because it's been deployed to the staging environment, it's actually changed the state of that staging environment, and that state is stored in Git. So you can see changes happening here. And most likely raise a pull request, and that would be merged in.
It's actually, it's too slow, it's already merged. Because it validated its testing, it's now merged the state, it's merged the pull request to say that this environment looks like that, and it's now promoted that application out to that environment. So if I do a JX get applications, let's have a look. Okay, so that's our Golang. It's not particularly exciting, but that's how it looks. If we want to make a change to that application, how long have we got left, by the way? How long have we got left?
That's okay.
Yeah, I can do this in 5 minutes. Oh no. We're not leaving till Google comes back online. No, just kidding. So this is my application here. The file that is the main one is, this is what we're going to do. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use GitOps, I'm going to use Git, I'm going to push a change into GitHub. Let's see how it works. So first thing I do, I'm going to create a branch. Oh. I'm going to change this. Let's delete all that. So I'm just going to change the title. We'll save that. We're going to add a pull request, quick pull request, quick commit. Now I normally use the hub CLI to do this, but I'm not going to. I'm going to use JX create PR because I've been told I need to demo this. Which will use the title of my commit to create the pull request. It's a quick way of, really quick way of creating a pull request from the command line if you need it.
Kind of uses a local branch-based development strategy that pretty much all of us do. It's quite nice. We never operate long-lived branches because they get messy very quickly, and we create pull requests from the branches that we're working on.
So exactly as Kai was saying, these are all recommendations from the Accelerate book about how you do trunk-based development, how you keep changes to the minimum, small changes, get them going through your system as fast as possible. So we're huge fans of that book. And also the books, I suppose, that book is based on, so like continuous delivery and the rest of them as well. So let's see, how's that going through? So this is now building that pull request.
And then what you should see then is an output on the PR comments after the build of the pull request. You should then start to see a message there showing your environment. Cool. There we are.
So we can actually go and have a look at that pull request and see that this is the preview environment that's been created. Now, if there's other resources that you need for that preview environment, you can just add that into your Helm chart. You can do what you need. You can see hello from DevOps Playground. And then we should see that going right the way through to our staging environment. In fact, if I do...
So if anybody caught that quickly, just before we clicked on that link, what you'll see is that PR was merged. And it's because that we don't have any config set up for any testing strategies on that repository at the moment. But what we can do, you can set up proud config that will rely upon certain contexts to pass before it goes ahead and merges them. So you could have like an integration test, you could have like a full-blown end-to-end environment test, you could have whatever you needed really to set up and test that repository that you read that PR for. So it wouldn't automatically get merged. It'd get merged as long as those contexts pass.
So we use Jenkins X to build Jenkins X. So if you want to go and have a look at the Jenkins X repository, there's about 8 different build contexts on every single change that comes through. So it needs a few labels to be set, but essentially we're creating clusters in different environments. So we get a member of the community that comes in and wants to propose a test. We have a quick look at it. Yeah, we're happy with that. Okay to test. And then we get sort of 8 clusters with different environments, different configurations, all go off at the run at different speeds and come back and then comment on that PR. And once they're all accepted, yep, it's merged. So that's running the promotion to that environment.
I believe once it goes into staging, it's a manual promotion then to production, right?
Yep.
So it's not kind of like, oh, I'm shocked it's gone straight into production. It could be a manual step where you say, hey, I want to JX promote this application, and I want it to go from my staging environment now, which has ultimately gone in from my PR being merged. I want it to go to production. You can run that command, and it would then go into production.
So if I refresh this, that hasn't worked. We'll work out why. Am I on the right one? Oh, it's not completed yet.
Yeah, it should be this one. Same as there.
Yeah. Okay. And that's the new application pushed into a staging environment. It's also worth saying, so if I do JX get ends, here you can see all the different environments you can have. So it's possible to structure up as, if you want 10 different environments in your pipeline, you can lay them through. You can say which ones you want to be automatic promotion on success of the previous one, or if you want it to be a manually invoked promotion as well. And sorry, go on, yep.
Yep. So whenever you commit this change and it's built, is every time it's create a new URL for the preview?
No, that was the same. So the preview environment will be a new URL, yes. So you can have multiple PRs at the same time, all on the same application that you can then hook in.
So how if there's a multiple user, is that the URL dissolve itself or?
So the URL has the name of the user, or the name of the PR in there. So let's have a look.
Your PR numbers increment. Okay. You essentially get a new namespace environment for that PR. Essentially get a new URL to the preview environment.
Yeah.
Okay. So what
So
about?
if you it's quite hard, but at the very bottom there, you can see the PR number in the URL. So it actually creates your own namespace and kind of copies it, configures in anything that you configure in that chart. So if there are any dependencies that you need, and then deploys it there. So if there are multiple open PRs at the same time, you'll have lots of applications deployed. James Strachan actually has an amazing video on this, where he uses Glue, to basically scale all of the preview environments to 0 unless there are no requests. So it's like a slight extension of what I'm showing today. But as you hit refresh, that environment will boot, and then it's there. And then as soon as if there's not been any requests for 30 minutes, it will scale itself back down to 0. So you're not paying anything for that.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So what about the possibility if I push the code in preview environment, I'm not happy with the change to ship on the production?
Yep. So you can just push another change to that pull request.
Okay, is that something to revert back or something like that?
Yeah. So you can revert it. You can close it. There's a controller in there that will look for closed pull requests.
Okay.
That haven't been merged after a period of time, and make sure that there's nothing running. I think it runs every hour or something like that, and automatically shuts down those environments.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How do you get the test strategy?
So again,
Test strategy, the execution of the test after the pipeline.
so if you want to test after on a preview environment, there's hooks in the make file for you to do that. So there's automatically a little area where you can add that in. I think at the moment, by default, it literally just curls to make sure that the app is up and running. But you're free to go and add whatever you need to. We use Ginkgo and Ginkgo to run BDD tests against our environments. Yeah, but it's very easy to set up, but it's not. You wouldn't get that for an out of the box sort of thing. Any other questions? That was basically the end of my demo. Good hands, good hands, good hands.
Instead of having using the CLI, is there a way that
Yep.
we can use the API to trigger from something of our own build management tool or something?
So what the CLI is doing is it's behind the scenes is calling the Kubernetes API server. So they all exist. So what we do is that the CLI basically creates or modifies existing CRDs in the system. That's all it's doing. So if you want to use another way of doing that, that's completely up to you. The UI that we've built that CloudBees can do, all it's doing is visualizing the data that those CRDs expose. So it's there, it's ready for extension. In the same way that everything that we're doing in Jenkins X, when we create those pipelines, we've got our own CRDs. We're listening for changes. We're then translating that into changes into Tecton and for everything else under the scene, behind the scenes that are then running those pipelines.
And as Gareth mentioned earlier at the end of the presentation, if you want to get involved, there's a couple of channels on Kubernetes Slack. There's Jenkins X Dev and Jenkins X User. You're more than willing to post questions on there. Please sign up to the newsletter, jenkinsx.io/community. And also, if you're really, really keen to get involved, we also do office hours bi-weekly on a Thursday afternoon. UK time, it's normally 4 p.m. So jump onto that, ask questions, get involved. We're all willing to help everyone, and you may have some custom environment that you want to work on to do some extra testing, or you've got some different applications you want to deploy and you want to help create the build pack. Get involved, ask some questions.
Sorry. Dacia, is this only on Google Cloud or?
So the demo I showed today was all on Google Container Engine, or Google Kubernetes Engine. Open source Jenkins X supports, it's like EKS, AKS, it's AWS with COPS. There's a whole pile of stuff. Yeah, there's DigitalOcean, I think. They're not stuff that we've been looking at, but other people have been adding in contributions to do that. So we know we have people running in a large range of them. There is a CloudBees supported version of Jenkins X coming very soon. That will have the UI in it automatically, but I think the CloudBees supported version of Jenkins X is already there. That at the moment only supports GKE in certain workloads. But yeah. But if you I think there are people running it on Oracle Cloud, IBM. There's a few people. Don't know why, but yeah.
Yes. So the Jenkins CI, been a long time, in production. Jenkins X, is it sort of gathering pace? Are you looking to deprecate Jenkins CI? You can have both streams running at the same time?
So I think long term, we're probably talking 10 years. Mm-hmm. They're looking at deprecating Jenkins CI. That's very, very, very long term. It's going to take us a long time to get there. What we're really trying to do is look at how we can extend Jenkins X to take over some of the workloads that Jenkins CI will cope with.
Yeah, that's a follow-up question, really.
Yeah, it's a really difficult problem because Jenkins CI is so infinitely configurable. We have to cater for all those things. Yeah. And actually some of the ways you can configure it are wrong. Now we don't want to replicate that thing that's incorrect. But we want to try and work out a way to help people migrate. And maybe it's like, don't leave your scripted pipelines where they are. Maybe we can work out a way of importing like that and regenerating your pipelines for you. Because using the build pack and the language detection that we use, maybe we can detect it's a Golang app and therefore we can do it this way, or it's a Spring app or something.
And the support for deploying not on Kubernetes? So
at the moment, Jenkins X only runs on Kubernetes.
But you're deploying.
So you could. So we have examples of people doing Terraform builds with this. Uh-huh. So they're basically using a review and a pull request to push out Terraform stuff. We had a very quick POC on doing Cloud Foundry stuff. So it does work. It requires a bit of effort, but it can work. It's not. Yeah, it's certainly not as polished as we want. There's a few, there's no reason why you can't. We've been in conversation with people to try to understand, can we get it to deploy to embedded systems? They're very, very keen on working out how we can do that. And there's no reason why we can't. And the fact that it scales to 0, they see as a massive value add for them.
Just time and effort.
Yeah. Cool. If that's it, thank you very much.